A Deathworlder human confronted an alien army and erased them completely. Short introduction. The galaxy knew Earth as a death world, a planet so hostile that its very environment forged its inhabitants into creatures of unparalleled resilience and adaptability. When the Council of Worlds learned of humanity's rise, they watched with wary fascination, doubting that any species from such a cursed world could ever make it off-planet. But humanity defied the odds, as they always did. And now, the galaxy trembled. The frontier world of Kael'thor, a peaceful agricultural planet under the protection of the Council, found itself under siege by the Zarnak Dominion, a ruthless alien empire known for leaving no survivors. Kael'thor's defenders were outnumbered, outgunned, and on the brink of annihilation. But one human remained, a lone survivor, a Deathworlder. Her name was Commander Rain Solis, and she would not run, she would not surrender. She would teach the Zarnak what it truly meant to challenge a species forged by death itself. Shadows on Kael'thor. The air above Kael'thor shimmered with heat as the twin suns hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the vast amber fields of agriplants. The once thriving colony now stood on the precipice of destruction, its settlements reduced to smoldering ruins. Zarnak warships darkened the skies, their sleek, obsidian hulls blotting out the light as squadrons of drones scoured the land for survivors. Beneath a cracked ridge near the southern plains, Commander Rain Solis crouched in the dirt, her breathing steady despite the chaos surrounding her. Her suit, an advanced combat exoskeleton, was battered and scored from countless skirmishes, but it remained functional. She checked her weapon, an experimental Gauss rifle scavenged from a fallen Council operative, now modified with her own Deathworlder ingenuity. Rain's HUD flickered, displaying the grim truth: colony survivors, 0. Active hostiles, 10,743. Her lip curled into a grim smile. They really shouldn't have pushed their luck, she muttered, her voice carrying the unmistakable growl of a predator who had just found her prey. The Zarnak were not unprepared. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, each with their own unique defenses and warriors. To them, Kael'thor was just another acquisition, a quiet farming planet whose pacifist inhabitants had barely any military presence. Even the Council of Worlds had hesitated to respond, unwilling to risk provoking a full-scale war with the Dominion. But Rain? She wasn't bound by diplomacy. Her earpiece crackled as a signal from the Zarnak flagship broadcast across the planet. The voice was guttural, dripping with condescension. "Human," it sneered, "your resistance is meaningless. Surrender yourself, and we may grant you the mercy of a swift death." Rain chuckled, a low and menacing sound that echoed in the empty ridge. She activated her communicator, her voice sharp as the edge of a knife. "Zarnak scum," she said, "you've made 3 mistakes. 1. Invading this colony. 2. Underestimating me. And 3. She paused, switching her rifle to full charge, giving me time to prepare. In the shadows of death, the first squadron of Zarnak troops, a mix of towering reptilian warriors and their smaller, insectoid drones, descended into the valley below her. Their bioarmor glistened, and their energy weapons pulsed with an eerie green light. "Visual acquired," hissed one of the warriors, its 6 eyes narrowing as it scanned the ridge. Rain was ready. She had spent the last 36 hours rigging the valley with a network of traps, mines, and holographic decoys. Her training as a Deathworlder had taught her to use every advantage: terrain, psychology, and the enemy's own arrogance. The first explosion was a symphony of fire and shrapnel, shredding the lead warriors before they even realized they'd stepped into her kill zone. Rain moved like a ghost, her exosuit amplifying her speed and strength. She darted between the rocks, picking off targets with precision shots from her Gauss rifle. "Target is highly mobile," shrieked a drone, only to be silenced as Rain crushed its core under her boot. Within minutes, the valley was a graveyard. Smoke curled from the remains of the Zarnak squadron, their bioarmor melting from the intense heat of Rain's modified plasma mines. The warning: back aboard the Zarnak flagship. General Vrezkal watched the carnage unfold on his holodisplay. His clawed hand tightened into a fist, cracking the metal armrest of his command chair. "One human did this?" he growled, his voice thick with disbelief. "Why yes, General," stammered his lieutenant. She is unlike anything we have encountered before. Her tactics are..." "Enough!" Vreskal roared, slamming his fist down. "Deploy the full battalion. I want her eliminated." The holodisplay flickered, and for a moment, Vreskal thought it was a malfunction, but then he saw her Rain Solis, blood-streaked but unbroken, standing amidst the wreckage of his troops. She stared directly into the flagship's surveillance drone, her expression calm and unyielding. "You should have brought more soldiers," she said coldly, before the feed cut to static. A Deathworlder's war. The Zarnak battalion descended like a storm. Hundreds of troop transports screeched through the atmosphere, their engines roaring like angry beasts. The ground trembled under the weight of armored walkers, their legs spiking into the dirt with rhythmic thuds. Overhead, swarms of combat drones moved in perfect formation, their energy cannons charged and ready. Rain stood at the center of the valley, surrounded by the smoldering remains of the first squad she'd annihilated. Her exosuit sensors lit up with hostile signatures, her HUD awash with red. Hostiles detected, 2,158. The Zarnak were no strangers to overwhelming force. Against any other opponent, their numbers and firepower would have been decisive, but they had never faced a Deathworlder in open combat. Rain flexed her fingers around the grip of her Gauss rifle, its sleek barrel glowing faintly from residual heat. Her eyes narrowed as the first wave of drones broke formation and charged. "Let's get to work," she muttered. The dance of destruction. The drones attacked in coordinated strikes, their energy cannons firing rapid bursts designed to overwhelm even the fastest targets. But Rain was faster. Her exosuit enhanced her reflexes to inhuman levels, allowing her to sidestep incoming fire with almost casual ease. She raised her rifle, unleashing a storm of magnetically accelerated rounds that tore through the drones like paper. Each shot was precise, targeting weak points in their armor with lethal efficiency. Sparks rained from the sky as the drones spiraled out of control, crashing into the dirt. The ground troops followed, charging in tight formation. Zarnak warriors, towering and heavily armored, moved like a tidal wave. Their bio-augmented muscles bulged as they hefted energy lances and plasma blades, roaring battle cries that echoed across the valley. Rain didn't flinch. She triggered a hidden command on her wrist panel, activating a network of buried proximity mines. The earth erupted in a series of deafening explosions, sending Zarnak warriors flying in all directions. The survivors hesitated, momentarily stunned by the carnage. That hesitation was fatal. Rain sprinted into their ranks, her movements a blur, her Gauss rifle discharged round after round, the hypervelocity slugs punching clean through even the thickest armor. When the rifle overheated, she switched to her sidearm, a sleek plasma pistol, and continued the slaughter. Her combat knife flashed in the sunlight, slashing through exposed throats and weak joints with brutal precision. The Zarnak had expected to overwhelm her. Instead, they found themselves being systematically dismantled by a single Deathworlder. The last bastion. On the Zarnak flagship, General Vreskal seethed with rage. The holodisplays around him showed nothing but chaos, his forces being routed by a lone human who seemed more demon than mortal. "Deploy the Gravitas Walker," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "Crush her." The Gravitas Walker was a monstrosity of war. A towering siege engine equipped with heavy plasma cannons and a near-impenetrable energy shield. It was a weapon of last resort, reserved for conquering fortress worlds and annihilating entire armies. The massive machine descended from orbit, its landing thrusters carving deep craters into the valley floor. It stood over 30 meters tall, its dark metal hull bristling with weaponry. The energy shield crackled to life, encasing the walker in a shimmering dome of impenetrable force. From her vantage point, Rain watched the machine's arrival with an arched brow. "Well," she muttered, "that's new." The Gravitas Walker's cannons charged, emitting a low hum that built to a thunderous crescendo. With a deafening roar, it unleashed a torrent of plasma bolts, each one capable of vaporizing a building. Rain didn't wait. She bolted toward the walker, weaving through the storm of plasma fire with terrifying agility. The ground exploded around her, sending up showers of dirt and debris, but she never slowed. Her mind worked at lightning speed, analyzing the walker's movements and searching for weaknesses. Her HUD highlighted the energy shield generator mounted on its back, a vulnerability hidden beneath layers of armor. She grinned. There you are. Turning the tide. Rain activated her grappling module, a harpoon-like device built into her exosuit. With a sharp hiss, the cable fired. Latching onto the walker's chassis, she vaulted upward, landing on the machine's leg and scaling it with practiced ease. The walker's cannon swiveled, trying to lock onto her, but its bulk made it sluggish. Rain moved like liquid, darting from one surface to the next until she reached the shield generator. Time to say goodnight, she said, planting a high-yield plasma charge on the generator's casing. She leapt clear just as the charge detonated, the explosion ripping through the generator and causing the shield to collapse in a cascade of sparks. The walker's cannons faltered, momentarily disabled by the overload. Rain didn't waste a second. She sprinted toward the walker's exposed core, her Gauss rifle raised. A single, well-placed shot was all it took. The core exploded in a blinding flash, consuming the walker in a fiery inferno. The reckoning. As the smoke cleared, Rain stood amidst the wreckage, her silhouette framed by the dying light of Kael'thor's twin suns. The valley was littered with the remains of the Zarnak army, drones, soldiers, and the twisted metal husk of the Gravitas walker. On board the Zarnak flagship, General Vreskal stared at the holodisplay in stunned silence. His greatest weapon, his entire battalion, obliterated by a single human. Rain's voice crackled through the calms, cold and unrelenting. This is your last chance, Vreskal, she said. Leave this planet, or I'll come for you next. Vreskal hesitated, his clawed hand trembling. He knew fear now, a feeling alien to a conqueror of worlds. Retreat, he growled. All forces, retreat. The Zarnak fleet withdrew, their warships disappearing into the void. Kael'thor was saved, its fields quiet once more. Rain lowered her weapon, her expression unreadable. She was a Deathworlder, forged by the most hostile environment in the galaxy, and now, the Zarnak Dominion would remember that humans were not to be underestimated. Echoes of war. The Zarnak Dominion's retreat from Kael'thor was not a sign of surrender. It was a pause, a calculated withdrawal to regroup and reassess. For centuries, the Dominion had crushed resistance without question. Now, they faced a single human who had turned their strength into ash. This was not an end, it was a beginning. Rain Solis knew this. She stood atop a hill overlooking the valley, her exosuit sensors scanning the horizon. Her body ached from the battle, muscles sore and wounds burning, but she ignored the pain. It wasn't over yet. The Zarnak would return, and next time, they wouldn't underestimate her. Her HUD displayed a signal, distress beacon activated, source, Kael'thor Orbital Relay Station. The relay station was still operational, its automated systems broadcasting a plea for aid to the Council of Worlds. Rain doubted the Council would respond. They had already turned their backs on Kael'thor, unwilling to provoke the Zarnak. But perhaps, she thought, she could use the station to send a different message, one that the Dominion would never forget. The Council's silence, far from Kael'thor. In the gleaming chambers of the Council of Worlds, delegates argued beneath the cold light of a crystalline dome. Representatives from 100 species debated the Zarnak invasion, their voices a cacophony of fear and indecision. The Zarnak have overstepped their bounds, barked Ambassador Thren, a multi-limbed Kari diplomat. Kael'thor was under our protection. Protection we cannot afford to enforce, countered a pale, amphibian-like delegate. If we confront the Dominion, it will mean war. And what of the human? Thren pressed. Reports suggest she single-handedly repelled the Zarnak forces. A Deathworlder, another delegate hissed. Unpredictable, dangerous. If she's as capable as the reports suggest, perhaps we should fear her more than the Zarnak. From the shadows, a lone figure observed the debate. Ambassador Alina Krysc, Earth's representative to the Council. remained silent, her expression unreadable. Humanity was still new to the galactic stage, and Rain's actions could either elevate their standing or turn them into pariahs. Alina's mind raced. She knew Rain knew her capabilities and her resolve. If the council wouldn't act, Alina would need to find another way to help. Quietly, she tapped into her personal communicator, sending a coded message to Earth's defense fleet. Rain's message. Rain arrived at the orbital relay station, its interior dark and cold, the hum of ancient machinery the only sound. She moved with caution, her rifle raised, scanning for signs of Zarnak forces. The station appeared abandoned, but experience had taught her that appearances could kill. The central console flickered to life as she approached, its screen displaying the distress signal. Rain disabled the beacon and accessed the station's long-range transmitters. Her fingers danced over the controls, bypassing layers of encryption. She wasn't sending a request for aid, she was sending a warning. The Zarnak Dominion thought they were unstoppable. Rain intended to prove otherwise. "This is Commander Rain Solis of Earth," she began, her voice steady and sharp. "To the Zarnak Dominion, you have made a grave mistake. Your forces fled today because you faced one human. Imagine what will happen if you face all of us." She leaned closer to the console, her eyes narrowing. "Your empire thrives on fear, but fear cuts both ways. The galaxy will hear of Kale Thor, and they will know you can be defeated. Your reign of terror ends now. Run while you still can." The transmission ended. Rain leaned back, her chest heaving as the adrenaline subsided. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself a small, weary smile. The Zarnak's fury. In the heart of Zarnak space, General Vreskal seethed as he watched Rain's broadcast replay on his flagship's monitors. His claws dug into the armrests of his chair, carving deep grooves into the metal. "She mocks us," he growled. "This Deathworlder dares to challenge the Dominion." His advisors murmured nervously, unwilling to meet his gaze. Vreskal turned to his second-in-command, a wiry insectoid named Krenzik. "Prepare the fleet," Vreskal ordered. "If the Council will not retaliate, then we will. I want Kale Thor obliterated, and I want her brought to me alive." "But General," Krenzik said cautiously, "her message is spreading. If we attack again, it may unite the other species against us." Vreskal slammed a clawed fist into the console, shattering it. "Let them unite. By the time they act, we will have crushed this human and made an example of her. Prepare the fleet." Earth's response. Far from the chaos. In the Sol system, Earth's Defense Command received Ambassador KRYSZ's urgent message. Fleet Admiral Marcus Cade stood in the command center, his jaw tight as he reviewed the report. "Kale Thor," he muttered, "one of ours is holding the line alone." "We can't let her fight this war by herself," said Admiral Ortega, his second-in-command. "The Zarnak won't stop until she's dead, and they'll destroy Kale Thor in the process." Admiral Cade nodded. "Prep the fleet. If the Council won't act, we will. And send a message to Kale Thor. Tell Commander Solis to hold on. Reinforcements are coming." The calm before the storm. On Kale Thor, Rain sat in the relay station's control room, cleaning her weapons and reviewing the station's defenses. The quiet was unsettling, a reminder that the next battle would be worse than the last. She didn't know if anyone had heard her message, she didn't know if help was coming, but she didn't care. Rain wasn't fighting for survival, she was fighting to send a message. Humanity would not be broken, no matter the odds. Her HUD pinged with an alert. Long-range sensors detected a massive Zarnak fleet entering the system. Thousands of warships, far more than before. Rain stood, her exhaustion forgotten. She picked up her rifle and stared out the station's viewport as the first ships emerged from hyperspace, their dark hulls blotting out the stars. "Round 2, she said softly. "Let's see if you've learned anything." The Siege of Kale Thor. The Zarnak fleet descended upon Kale Thor like a hurricane of fire and metal. Thousands of warships, from nimble corvettes to colossal dreadnoughts, encircled the planet. Orbital bombardments began almost immediately, raining destruction onto the surface and setting the amber fields ablaze. In the relay station, Rain Solis watched the chaos unfold from the viewport, her lips pressed into a thin line as she activated her comm system. AI-12, status report, she barked. The station's artificial intelligence, a crisp and efficient voice, responded immediately. Hostile fleet strength, overwhelming. Planetary survival probability, less than 3%. Your personal survival probability, negligible. Rain smirked. Good thing I don't believe in odds. She turned her attention to the station's defenses, automated turrets, planetary shields, and missile arrays, all woefully insufficient against an armada of this size. Still, Rain knew that if she could hold out long enough, reinforcements might arrive. She just had to survive. The Earth fleet arrives. Across the stars, Earth's fleet surged into action. 50 warships, led by the EHS Resolute, sped through hyperspace toward Kael'thor. Admiral Marcus Cade stood on the bridge of the flagship, his expression grim but determined. Status? He demanded. 12 minutes to planetary orbit. Ortega replied. The Zarnak fleet outnumbers us 20 to 1, Admiral. Cade nodded. Numbers aren't everything. Rain's holding the line down there. We owe it to her and the galaxy not to let this go unanswered. Bring the fleet into assault formation. Target their command ships first. The Earth fleet wasn't the largest in the galaxy, but it was the most advanced. Human ingenuity had birthed weapons and tactics that other species couldn't anticipate, and Cade intended to use every trick at their disposal. Rain's last stand. Back on the surface, Rain had rigged the relay station with every explosive and trap she could muster. The Zarnak ground forces were closing in, their numbers overwhelming, yet she moved with precision and fury, her exosuit enhancing her every motion as she fought. AI-12, she called out, divert all power to the station's energy cannons. Keep those bastards off me. Energy reserves critically low, the AI warned. Do it anyway. The ground rumbled as the station's cannons roared to life, firing massive plasma bolts into the sky. Several Zarnak landing ships exploded mid-descent, raining debris across the battlefield, but for every ship she downed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The Zarnak ground troops swarmed the station, their sheer numbers forcing Rain into close combat. Her Gauss rifle had run dry, so she drew her plasma pistol and combat knife, her movements a blur of deadly precision. Come on, then, she roared, her voice echoing through the smoke. Let's see what you've got. The turning point, above the planet, the Earth fleet emerged from hyperspace, their sleek, metallic hulls glinting in the starlight. Admiral Cade wasted no time. All ships, engage at will, he ordered. The battle was chaos. Earth's warships cut through the Zarnak fleet like wolves among sheep, their advanced railguns and missile systems wreaking havoc. Fighters swarmed the larger ships, targeting weak points with surgical strikes. The Zarnak, caught off guard by the sudden assault, struggled to regroup. On the surface, Rain heard the distant booms of orbital combat. For the first time in hours, hope flickered in her chest. Admiral Cade, she said into her calm, you're late. Apologies, Commander, Cade replied, his voice steady. Figured you could use some fireworks. Glad you could join the party. Rain's relief was short-lived. The Zarnak had deployed their heaviest ground unit, a Mauler Titan, a massive walker bristling with weapons. The ground shook as the machine advanced toward the relay station, its cannons obliterating everything in their path. Titan class incoming, AI-12 warned. Recommended action, retreat. Not my style, Rain muttered. She armed her last plasma charge, a high-yield explosive glowing ominously. The sacrifice. Rain's plan was reckless, even by Deathworlder standards. She sprinted toward the Mauler Titan, dodging plasma blasts and debris as she closed the distance. Her exosuit's servos strained under the effort, but she pushed forward, every step bringing her closer to the towering machine. The Zarnak pilot inside the Titan noticed her approach and redirected its firepower, but it was too late. Rain reached the machine's leg, planting the plasma charge against a critical joint. She had no time to escape. The explosion was deafening. The Mauler Titan's leg disintegrated, sending the massive machine crashing to the ground. Secondary explosions ripped through its hull, consuming it in a fiery inferno. When the smoke cleared, Rain was gone. Victory in orbit. Above the planet, the Earth fleet had turned the tide. The Zarnak ships, leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. Admiral Cade watched as the last enemy vessel disappeared into hyperspace. "Status?" he asked. "Kale Thor is secure," Ortega replied, "but we lost contact with Commander Solis." Cade's jaw tightened. "Send a search team. I want her found." A Deathworlder's legacy. Days later, the search teams recovered what little they could from the battlefield. The relay station was in ruins, and the valley was littered with the wreckage of Zarnak forces. They found Rain's exosuit, battered and empty, near the remains of the Mauler Titan. Admiral Cade stood silently as the recovery teams worked. He had known Rain for years, and he knew one thing for certain: if anyone could survive, it was her. But even Deathworlders had limits. Kael'thor's field slowly began to heal. The Council of Worlds, emboldened by humanity's actions, imposed sanctions on the Zarnak Dominion, forcing them to retreat from several occupied worlds. Rain's message had spread across the galaxy, inspiring resistance against tyranny. In the end, Rain Solis became a symbol, a reminder that even in the face of impossible odds, one person could make a difference. And somewhere, on a distant world, a lone figure moved through the shadows, her steps steady and unyielding. Rain Solis wasn't done yet.